More now on our top story. In fact, let's take you live to the Parliament in Athens, where Greek Prime Minister George Papandreou, you see him there, addressing MPs in Greece. And we're getting a flash from the Reuters news agency. Virginia just mentioned it there, that the Greek Prime Minister has struck a deal with ministers to step down and hand power to a negotiated coalition government if they help him win a confidence vote on Friday, which is scheduled for tomorrow. That confidence vote is likely to be won by a wafer-thin majority. The government's majority stands at 1 or 2. There's no translation on the Greek Prime Minister's speech, so unfortunately we can't bring you his words directly. Now, these sources are saying ministers involved in the deal were led by the Greek Finance Minister Evangelos Venizelos. He, of course, is one of the ministers who rebelled against the holding of a referendum that the Greek Prime Minister George Papandreou was very keen to hold to allow Greeks to cast vote on that EU bailout deal and by default cast vote on Greece's membership of the EU. This source has told the Reuters news agency that George Papandreou was told that he must leave calmly in order to save his party, and the Prime Minister has agreed to step down. It was a very civilised discussion with no acrimony. So just repeating the news, Greece's Prime Minister George Papandreou there, a man who's been under immense pressure over the last weeks, if not months, has agreed to step aside to allow Greek MPs to form a coalition government on the proviso that a scheduled no confidence motion in his government succeeds tomorrow. Let's look more at the backdrop to the unfolding Greek political crisis. This story from the BBC's Mark Lowen.
He has been at the helm of the Greek government during the worst crisis the country has faced for decades. But tonight there is intense speculation as to whether George Papandreou's time is up. The Prime Minister came to Parliament this afternoon in an attempt to calm nerves. The problems began earlier in the week after his surprise call for a referendum on the latest debt deal. With 4 ministers opposing the plan and a handful of MPs threatening to rebel, the Prime Minister was facing defeat in a confidence vote planned for tomorrow. But Mr. Papandreou defended his decision.
We had the dilemma between consensus and a referendum. If we had wider consent, we would not need the referendum.
Events have moved quickly today. Ministers arrived earlier for an urgent cabinet session in Parliament to discuss the referendum issue. Several are said to have urged him to resign. Although he is resisting the calls, there is a growing sense here that it may now be the only option.
The statement that came from Mr. Papandreou earlier this week concerning the referendum has caused such havoc in European affairs. I think that it is very difficult for him, having seen the reaction by members of his parliamentary group and also key ministers that have expressed their views today, for him to remain as Prime Minister.
Any new government would need to vote on the latest debt deal reached in Brussels last week. EU leaders agreed on another loan of £86 billion and a 50% debt write-off or reduction in Greece's debt mountain. But the country must make deep cuts in public spending, mainly to pensions and wages. And thousands of public sector workers would have to be dismissed.
Greece is going through intense pain to meet the terms of its bailouts. Businesses are closing, unemployment is soaring, and the economy is projected to shrink in 2012 for the 4th year running. This country can ill afford the political instability that it now looks set to endure.
On the streets of Athens, the sense of despair is growing.
I see my income going down, no business opportunities at all, and I mean, the recession is going deeper and deeper. If nothing is moving around you, you cannot do well.
I'm affected in my salary. They dismissed me from my job. They're putting tax all the time, and we see no future. That's the problem.
Came back in the evening, say you walk downtown, you spend all of our money, and you came back home. Oh,
not all the joy has vanished here in Athens, but Greeks are feeling intense uncertainty tonight. Whoever will lead the majority in Parliament will take the reins of an angry, bruised country, but one that is still at the eye of the European debt storm.
That was the BBC's Mark Lowen with that report.